When am I going? Hi, grade 3. It is Mrs. Wheeler here. I'm wanting to read or continue reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We didn't get a chance to finish the book, and it's such a good book. And so if you have a book at home, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you're welcome to read along. Grab it if you'd like. If not, I am just going to read it to you, and you can just listen to the story. We finished off at chapter 19. So today I'm going to read to you chapter 19 and 20. And then there are some questions at the end that I put on Google Classroom because remember, grade 3, not only is it important that you know how to read the book, but also that you understand what you're reading. So after I'm done reading the book, you're welcome to go onto Google Classroom and answer the comprehension questions that go along with it. All right. So chapter 19 is called The Inventing Room, Everlasting Gobstoppers, and Hair Toffee. When Mr. Wonka shouted, "Stop the boat! The Oompa Loompas jammed their oars into the river and backed water furiously," the boat stopped. The Oompa Loompas guided the boat alongside the red door. On the door, it said, "Inventing Room, Private, Keep Out." Mr. Wonka took a key from his pocket, leaned over the side of the boat, and put the key in the keyhole. "This is the most important room in the entire factory," he said. "All my most secret new inventions are cooking and simmering in here." Old Fickle Grubber would give his front teeth to be allowed inside for just 3 minutes. So would Prodnose and Slugworth and all the other rotten chocolate makers. But now listen to me. I want no messing about when you go in. No touching, no meddling, and no tasting. Is that agreed? "Yes, yes," the children cried. "We won't touch a thing." "Up to you now," Mr. Wonka said. "Nobody else, not even an Oompa Loompa, has ever been allowed in here." He opened the door and stepped out of the boat into the room. The 4 children and their parents all scrambled after him. "Don't touch," shouted Mr. Wonka, "and don't knock anything over." Charlie Bucket stared around the gigantic room in which he now found himself. The place was like a witch's kitchen. All about him, black metal pots were boiling and bubbling on huge stoves, and kettles were hissing and pans were sizzling, and strange iron machines were clanking and spluttering, and there were pipes running all over the ceiling and walls, and the whole place was filled with smoke and steam and delicious, rich smells. Mr. Wonka himself had suddenly become even more excited than usual, and anyone could see that this was the room he loved best of all. He was hopping about among the saucepans and the machines like a child among his Christmas presents, not knowing which thing to look at. First, he lifted the lid from a huge pot and took a sniff. Then he rushed over and dipped a finger into a barrel of sticky yellow stuff and had a taste. Then he skipped across to one of the machines and turned half a dozen knobs this way and that. Then he peered anxiously through the glass door of a gigantic oven, rubbing his hands and cackling with delight at what he just saw. Then he ran over to another machine, a small shiny affair that kept going plop, 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 and every time it went plop, plop, a large green marble dropped out into a basket on the floor. At least it looked like a marble. "Everlasting gobstoppers," cried Mr. Wonka proudly. "They're completely new. I am inventing them for children who are given very little pocket money. You can put an everlasting gobstopper in your mouth, and you can suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it, and it will never get any smaller." "It's like gum," cried Violet Beauregard. "It is not like gum," Mr. Wonka said. "Gum is for chewing, and if you try chewing one of these gobstoppers here, you break your teeth off. But they taste terrific, and they change color once a week, and they never get any smaller. They never disappear. Never. At least I don't think they do. There's one of them being tested this very moment in the testing room next door. An Oompa Loompa is sucking it. He's been sucking it for nearly a year now without stopping. And it's still just as good as ever. Now over here, Mr. Wonka went on, skipping excitedly across the room to the opposite wall. Over here, I'm inventing a completely new line in toffees. He stopped beside a large saucepan. The saucepan was full of thick, gooey, purplish, boiling and bubbling. By standing on his toes, little Charlie could just see inside it. That's hair toffee, cried Mr. Wonka. You eat just one tiny bit of that, and in exactly half an hour, a brand new, luscious, thick, silky, beautiful crop of hair will start growing all over the top of your head, and a mustache, and a beard. A beard, cried Violet Salt, or Veruca Salt. Who wants a beard, for heaven's sake? It would suit you very well, said Mr. Wonka. But unfortunately, the mixture is not quite right yet. I've got it too strong. It works too well. I tried it on an Oompa Loompa yesterday in the testing room, and immediately a huge beard started shooting out of his chin. And the beard grew so fast that soon it was trailing all over the floor in a thick, hairy carpet. It was growing faster than we could cut it. In the end, we had to use a lawnmower to keep it in check. But I'll get the mixture right soon. And when I do, then there'll be no excuse for any more little boys and girls going about with bald heads. But Mr. Wonka, said Mike TV, little boys and girls never go about with, don't argue, my dear child. Please don't argue, cried Mr. Wonka. It's such a waste of precious time. Now over here, if you will all step this way, I will show you something that I'm terrifically proud of. Oh, do be careful. Don't knock anything over. Stand back. So now we're on chapter 20 called The Great Gum Machine. Mr. Wonka led the party over to a gigantic machine that stood in the very center of the inventing room. It was a mountain of gleaming metal that towered high above the children and their parents. Out of the very top of it, there sprouted hundreds and hundreds of thin glass tubes, and the glass tubes all curled downwards and came together in a bunch of hung suspended over an enormous round tube as big as a bath. Here we go, cried Mr. Wonka, and he pressed 3 different buttons on the side of the machine. A second later, a mighty rumbling sound came from inside it, and the whole machine began to shake most frighteningly, and steam began hissing out all over it. And then suddenly the watchers noticed that runny stuff was pouring down the inside of the hundreds of little glass tubes and squirting out into the great tube below. And in every single tube, the runny stuff was a different color, so that all the colors of the rainbow, and many others as well, came sloshing and splashing into the tub. It was a lovely sight. And when the tube was nearly full, Mr. Wonka pressed another button, and immediately the runny stuff stopped running out of the tubes. The rumbling sound disappeared, and a whizzing, whirring noise took its place. And then a giant whizzer started whizzing round inside the enormous tube, mixing up all the different colored liquids like an ice cream soda. Gradually, the mixture began to froth. It became frothier and frothier, and it turned from blue to green, white to green to brown to yellow, then back to blue again. Watch, said Mr. Wonka. Click went the machine, and the whizzer stopped whizzing, and now there came a sort of sucking noise, and very quickly all the blue, frothy mixture in the huge basin was sucked back into the stomach of the machine. There was a moment of silence. Then a few queer rumblings were heard, then silence again. Then suddenly the machine let out a monstrous, mighty groan, and at the same moment a tiny drawer, no bigger than the drawer in a slot machine, popped out of the side of the machine, and in the drawer there lay something so small and thin and gray that everyone thought it must be a mistake. The thing looked like a little strip of gray cardboard. The children and their parents stared at the little gray strip lying on the drawer. You mean that's all? Said Mike TV, disgusted. That's all, answered Mr. Wonka, gazing proudly at the results. Don't you know what it is? There was a pause. Then suddenly Violet Beauregard The goofy gum-chewing girl let out a yell of excitement. By gum, it's gum, she shrieked. It's a stick of chewing gum. Right you are, cried Mr. Wonka, slapping Violet hard on the back. It's a stick of gum. It's a stick of the most amazing and fabulous and sensational gum in the world. All right, 3W. So now, if you are done reading this, you are welcome to go into Google Classroom and answer the comprehension questions on there. If you don't want to go onto Google Classroom, maybe you just want to write a chapter summary of what happened in these two chapters. So what happened at the beginning of chapter 19, what happened in the middle, and how did chapter 20 end? And so you're welcome to write the chapter summary in a journal, or you can do it on a Google Doc. That, again, is in Google Classroom. And send it to me, because I'd love to see what your summary is of these two chapters. So next week, we'll continue reading on with Charlie, and hopefully we can finish this wonderful book. Thank you for listening.